As a pastor, my daily work is very busy, but also very rewarding. Every weekend, I would bring Bible teaching and revelation to the believers at church. I would prepare interesting stories and examples so that people could better understand the truths in the Bible. Besides that, I would also conduct other services in the church, such as weddings, funerals, etc. In these occasions, I will provide spiritual support and comfort to the participants. I will also frequently communicate with other pastors and believers in order to share experiences and learn from them. In addition to these main tasks, I also need to manage the day-to-day operations of the church, including budget management, recruiting volunteers, and maintaining the church building. These tasks are also important because they help ensure that the church can continue its religious activities and services. All in all, my day-to-day work as a pastor is challenging and busy, but also very rewarding and fun. I feel that the work I do helps others and contributes to the community, which is one of the reasons I enjoy my job so much. It wasn't until I experienced an incident that gave me a whole new perspective on what my job means. One afternoon, I received a phone call from an unknown person. The voice on the other end of the line was anxious and told me that his father was in the hospital and was not doing well. He wanted to see a priest before he died. I understood the situation very well, as it was part of my job. I asked the person for his father's name and the address of the hospital and then told him I would get there as soon as possible. I immediately began packing my things and getting ready to rush to the hospital. I opened my drawer and pulled out a Bible. I grabbed my car keys and walked out the door. I got into the driver's seat. I felt very nervous because I knew it was an emergency and I had to get to the hospital as soon as possible. I looked at the map, found the shortest route, and started driving to the hospital. At an intersection, I saw that the red light was on, so I stopped. I knew I needed to wait for the light to turn green before I could proceed, so I waited. When the light came on green, I was ready to move on. But, as I was about to go, I suddenly felt my car get hit. I lost control of my car. I tried to control the direction of my vehicle, but it hit a vehicle traveling in the opposite direction, causing a serious crash. I felt very painful and dizzy. At this time, passers-by spotted me. They approached my car, asked about my condition, and called the police to contact an ambulance to come. I heard the ambulance, but due to the severity of my injuries, I had passed out. I don't know what happened after that. When I regained consciousness again, I found myself in a white tunnel. My body was painless and I felt very relaxed. I was very confused. What was this place? I found that there were many other souls here as well. I tried to go forward, but there seemed to be no end. I began to feel fear and anxiety. A spirit approached me and said, "Welcome to this place, my friend." I nodded and asked, somewhat puzzled, "What is this place? Why have I come here?" The spirit smiled and replied, "This is the land of light, and you have come here because your life has ended, and now you can enjoy eternal peace here." I asked him, "What should we do next?" He replied, "Nothing needs to be done. Just wait for the gates of heaven to open." Just then, a huge door appeared in front of me. As I gazed at the gates of heaven, I felt my heart beat faster. I knew this was going to be an amazing experience. Suddenly, the gate began to open slowly. Through the doorway, a bright light shone in my face. It made me feel warm and peaceful. The color of the light was very pure, without a trace of impurities. All the fear and anxiety disappeared. I followed the other souls into the light. I felt the weight on me completely disappear, as if I had become an invisible energy and entered a new realm with the other souls. As I stepped into the other side of the door, my vision was instantly filled with a vast and glorious sight. I saw an endless green meadow scattered with all kinds of flowers. The golden rays of the sun poured down on me, making me feel warm and joyful. I gazed at the world and heard the sound of laughter. The moment other souls entered the gates of heaven, they put on white robes. Nothing changed for me, and I felt a little confused. I didn't know where to go next. The other souls wore white robes and all seemed to know where to go. They flew freely in all directions, as if they had returned to their respective homes. I, however, did not know which direction to go. The sight of heaven was so beautiful that I seemed to be lost in this wonderful world. The light of the sun shone on me and I felt overwhelmed with happiness, but also a little lonely and helpless. I started to explore around, hoping to find some clues. I wanted to understand the order and rules of this world. I saw some souls participating in celebrations and some enjoying beautiful music. I tried to approach them, but I could not join their circle. I seemed to lack some special talent or gift. Suddenly, I saw a dazzling light appear in front of me. As the light faded, I recognized that the figure was Jesus. I was a little dumbfounded because I did not expect to see Jesus in heaven. He looked very gracious, and his gaze revealed an endless love and forgiveness. I stood there, and I didn't know what to say. Jesus smiled and welcomed me. He knew all about me, my joys and my pains, and he accepted all my faults and mistakes, giving me a deep sense of comfort and peace. We strolled together through the gardens of heaven and my heart was filled with emotion. At that moment, I knew that I was loved and that I would never be alone because he would always be with me. As we enjoyed the beauty of the garden, we talked about my life and work. Jesus asked me with concern, "How do you usually work?" I replied, "I work hard and try to do my best because I know God will help us overcome difficulties. I reach out to others and tell them that God is omnipotent. I encourage them to pray to God and trust in His power and mercy because He will bring us strength and revelation." Jesus smiled and nodded. But I felt as if he was a little dissatisfied. He then asked me, "Do you think God is an all-powerful God?" I answered, somewhat hesitantly, "Yes, I think God is omnipotent, and He can help me overcome any difficulty." Jesus' expression became somewhat serious as he said, "My child, while it is true that God is all-powerful, He also expects you to take responsibility for your own life and work. You need to take responsibility for your own decisions and actions, rather than simply relying on God's power." I was so amazed that I began to reflect on my past decisions and actions. I was grateful that he had pointed this out to me. I knew that Jesus' words were out of concern and love for me. Jesus looked at me slightly and then said gently, "My child, not everyone is in trouble and I can help them." I asked Jesus why he could not help all who needed help. Jesus explained to me that every person's experience and destiny is different. Even praying for God's strength will not solve the problem. Jesus told me that His power and compassion are unlimited, but sometimes He wants us to also rely on our own strength and wisdom to face difficulties and challenges. He encouraged me to trust in my own abilities and to actively seek solutions to problems. I probably understood what he meant. Although God is omnipotent, we also need to rely on our own strength and wisdom to solve problems. We can't just rely on the strength of others, but we need to actively look for solutions to our problems. Jesus, however, told me that I had to go back now and that my mission was not yet complete. Feeling somewhat confused and puzzled, I asked Jesus what my mission was. He didn't answer my question directly. He told me that I must continue to follow my faith and values and do my best to bring warmth and help to others. I must go back and continue to play my role. To live up to my potential, both in work and in life. Strive to make this world a better place. Although I didn't want to leave heaven, I listened to Jesus' words. He sent me to the tunnel. I walked toward the tunnel, feeling like I was floating in the air along the way, unencumbered by gravity. The light in the tunnel changed, sometimes shining brightly and sometimes becoming soft and comforting. I kept walking along the tunnel and eventually reached the end. There, I felt my body begin to descend until I was back inside my body. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on a hospital bed surrounded by some white walls and equipment. I felt a great pain in my head. I saw my family and doctors waiting by the bedside for me to wake up. They had concerned looks on their faces and were relieved to see me wake up, expressing their care and concern. The doctor told me that I only had a mild concussion. I needed to rest in the hospital for a while. I felt very grateful because it meant I hadn't suffered any more serious injuries. Over the next few days, I spent time resting and recovering in the hospital. My family and friends came to visit me and brought me flowers, which made me feel very warm. After what I went through, my understanding of God changed in a whole new way. I understood that God is indeed all-powerful, but that not every prayer we make will necessarily be answered. I began to think about why this was the case. I realized it's not because God doesn't care about us or can't help us, but because our prayers don't always line up with God's will. God doesn't answer my prayers in the way we expect. Because He has a deeper understanding and plan for our future. I no longer see God as an all-powerful God who meets my needs, but as a wise Creator. I began to learn to accept His will. I also learned to trust that God has His own arrangements and plans when facing some setbacks and difficulties. Through my contact with Jesus and constant reflection and study, I became more deeply aware of the holiness of God. I learned to live each day with gratitude and optimism, with faith and hope in God and in my own life. Shortly after my recovery, I began to return to my normal life. I began to think and change the way I worked. I no longer preached that God was the Almighty God and that I should pray to God when I encountered any difficulties, as I had done before. Instead, I began to see things from a more practical perspective. I began to focus more on my actions and practices, rather than just relying on prayer to solve problems. Also, I stopped preaching God's teachings in a traditional way and focused more on delivering the message through action. I began to do more charitable work and help more people with difficult problems in their lives. In the process, I also began to show more of my faith and values, so that others could feel God's presence and His love in my words and actions.